The sky above the broken moon of Kiros 9 burned with orange fire as the final wave of escape ships vanished into orbit. Beneath them, smoke rose from the shattered battlefield. The war between the Kelleran Dominion and the unified colonies had reached yet another brutal turning point. Among the wreckage of one downed scout vessel, silence hung heavy. The twisted metal of the sleek alien ship groaned as it cooled, its once glowing engines now dark. Inside, buried under fragments of the cockpit frame, lay the Kelleran pilot, Vetra. Her breathing was shallow. Her silver-blue skin, once glowing with health, was pale. One leg was pinned, crushed under a piece of armor plating. Blood, thick and dark purple, had dried down her side, her eyes barely opened, flickering with pain and confusion. The mission had been simple. Vetra was delivering intel, a memory, core full of coordinates and fleet movements. She had flown hundreds of these runs before, but this time the humans had fired first. A sudden ambush. Her ship took a direct hit. She had tried to crash land near an abandoned outpost. She had failed. Vetra tried to move, but the pain tore through her like a blade. Her leg no longer responded. She screamed, a sound that was swallowed by the cold wind outside. She reached for her comlink, only to find it cracked. She was alone. Hours passed, maybe days. The sun of Kiros 9 never fully set, but shadows grew longer across the rocks. A part of her hoped the Kelleran retrieval teams would come. She was a decorated scout, after all, one of the best. But no one came. When she finally tore herself free using a broken shard of metal as a lever, her body shook with exhaustion. She dragged herself from the wreck and collapsed onto the rocky dirt, staring up at the sky. She had lost more than her leg. She had lost her worth. On the edge of the valley, a human named Mason had seen the ship fall. He wasn't a soldier or a scout. He wasn't even from the military. Mason was a salvage tech, one of the many who stayed behind after the main conflict moved to other star systems. He lived alone in a quiet shelter built from scrap and solar panels. He kept to himself. He avoided trouble, but a ship falling from the sky was something he couldn't ignore. Mason walked for hours through the sharp canyons, his breathing mask strapped tight against the dry air. When he reached the crash site, he expected to find a body or nothing at all. Instead, he found her. Vetra was barely awake when she saw the human silhouette approach. She flinched, ready to strike, but her body didn't move. He didn't raise a weapon. Instead, he crouched beside her. "You're alive," Mason said, surprised. "That's something." Vetra stared at him. Her language translator clicked softly in her ear. "You are human." "And you're bleeding," he replied. "We can argue later. Right now, let's get you out of here." She wanted to refuse. Her pride screamed at her to say no. But she was too weak to speak. Her body betrayed her, slumping against his chest as he gently lifted her in his arms. Mason carried her back across the canyon, one step at a time. He didn't ask who she was. He didn't care what side she had fought on. All he knew was that someone was dying and he could help. He placed her gently onto a cot in his shelter. He cleaned her wounds. He sterilized the leg. He gave her water. Vetra blinked slowly as she lay in the dim light of the shelter. Her leg was gone. Bandaged, roughly cauterized. A sharp emptiness pulsed where it used to be. She turned her head and saw the human preparing a crude mechanical limb out of spare servos and tubing. "I don't want your help," she whispered. Mason didn't look up. "Then consider it repayment. You crashed into my salvage field. I need you to help me fix it eventually." "I can't even stand. Yet," Mason said quietly. Vetra stared at the ceiling. She didn't believe him. She didn't believe in anything anymore, but somehow, for the first time since the crash, she wasn't afraid. Not of dying and not of surviving. The shelter was quiet except for the soft clicking of tools. Mason sat at his workbench, carefully adjusting the joints of a makeshift prosthetic leg. Wires, gears, and repurposed drone parts lay scattered across the table. Outside, the wind blew red dust against the walls like a soft whisper, reminding him how alone this planet truly was. Behind him, Vetra watched in silence. She had been awake for a few hours, her body still weak, her thoughts heavy. Mason had given her water, food, paste, and bandaged her leg again. She hadn't spoken much, only short answers, and sometimes not even that. Now she stared at the thing he was building. It was ugly, uneven, human-made, not like the sleek, smooth tech her people used. Still, it moved. It bent at the knee. It could hold weight. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. Mason didn't turn. "Would you prefer I didn't?" She frowned. "You don't even know who I am." "Don't need to." He paused and glanced over his shoulder. "You crashed. You were hurt. That's enough." Vetra looked away, her silver eyes dull. "I'm Kalaran. Your people fought mine." Mason smiled slightly. "And I'm human. Congratulations, we both have baggage." Vetra didn't reply. She closed her eyes and leaned back against the makeshift pillow. Her leg ached with a sharp throb, but the pain was nothing compared to the emptiness she felt inside. Being a scout was her whole life. She was fast, skilled, trusted. Now she couldn't even walk. "You think this leg will fix me?" she muttered. "No," Mason said calmly. "But it's a start." She opened her eyes. "I don't need a start. I need to be left alone." He finally turned to face her. "I don't believe that. You don't know me. Maybe. But I know what it looks like when someone gives up." His voice was quiet but firm. "And I've seen it in your eyes since the moment I found you." Vetra said nothing. She didn't want to admit he was right. She had given up. She had expected to die in that wreck, maybe even welcomed it. What was she without her mission, without her speed, her precision, her usefulness? Mason picked up the half-finished leg and walked over to her cot. He held it up. "It's not perfect, but it's strong. It'll hold your weight. Want to try it?" She stared at it. Part of her wanted to throw it aside, but her hand moved before her mind made the choice. She touched the cool metal. It hummed slightly, reacting to her touch. He helped her sit up. His grip was steady, not forceful. Together, they secured the prosthetic to what remained of her thigh. It clicked into place with a soft hiss. "Try moving it," Mason said. Vetra hesitated. She shifted her body. The leg moved, clunky, stiff, but responsive. "I can't stand," she said flatly. "Not yet," he agreed. "But you will. You're so sure." "I've seen worse come back." Vetra's eyes narrowed. "You've seen war?" Mason looked away. "Not directly. My brother did. He came back with pieces missing too. Didn't stop him. He learned how to build, how to fix. He taught me most of what I know." She glanced at the tools. "So, this is your way of honoring him?" "No," Mason said quietly. "It's my way of helping someone who needs it. That's enough for me." Vetra didn't reply. For a long moment the room was silent again. Then she leaned forward slightly, testing the leg. It groaned, but it supported her weight. She breathed hard through clenched teeth. Her arms trembled. She didn't stand, but she didn't fall either. Mason smiled. "Told you." Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "Why are you really doing this?" He met her eyes. "Because you're still alive. That means you still matter." Her heart beat faster for reasons she didn't understand. She wasn't used to kindness, especially not from a human. For now, she said nothing. But something in her chest shifted just a little. Hope didn't return fully, but it knocked softly at the door. The days passed slowly on Kiros 9. Dust storms came and went, covering the solar panels in red sand. Mason cleaned them every morning without fail, and every evening he returned to the shelter, checking on Vetra's healing. Vetra's body was recovering, but her spirit was still broken. Even as her strength returned, her voice remained quiet, her mood cold. She didn't ask questions. She didn't thank him. She rarely made eye contact. But she did watch. She watched him fix machines, cook food, and build things from scraps that others would have thrown away. And most importantly, she watched him improve her leg. The first version had been clumsy and painful. The second was better, with smoother joints and a lighter frame. Mason adjusted it daily, using feedback from Vetra, even when she answered in single words. He never pushed her. He only said, "Try again," after each small failure. Then one evening, something cracked. Vetra had been practicing standing in the middle of the shelter. The new leg held well, but she couldn't keep her balance. She fell hard onto the floor, her hands scraping against the metal. Pain shot through her arm. Mason rushed over to help her up, but she pushed him back. "Don't touch me," she shouted. He froze. She sat up slowly, breathing hard. "You think this will make me whole again? That this piece of junk can make me forget what I lost?" Mason didn't respond. He stood quietly, giving her space. "I was a scout," she continued, her voice shaking with anger. "I flew through asteroid fields. I slipped behind enemy lines. I was respected. Feared." She looked down at the metal limb. "Now I'm just a broken weapon." "You're not a weapon," Mason said calmly. She glared at him. "Then what am I?" He walked to the workbench, picked up a small drone part, and tossed it to her. She caught it instinctively. "You're someone who's still breathing. That means you can still choose." Vetra looked at the object in her hand. It was nothing. Just a cracked camera lens. "What am I supposed to do with this?" she asked. Mason smiled. "You tell me." The next day, Vetra sat beside him at the bench. She didn't say much at first. She just watched, then started handing him tools. Then, she started pointing out small adjustments. Then she picked up a wrench herself. By the end of the day, she was making suggestions. Some were even better than Mason's. "You ever build before?" he asked. "No," she replied. "Scouts don't build. We fly." "Could have fooled me," Mason said. Vetra allowed herself a small smile. Only for a moment. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the dusty hills, she stood again, this time on her own. Mason sat nearby, watching silently. She took a deep breath. The leg whirred softly. She took one step, then another. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't fast, but it was real. "I'm walking," she said softly. "You are." Mason nodded. "And you did it yourself?" Her face showed a mix of surprise and disbelief. She'd imagined standing again 100 times, but not like this. Not with a human helping her. Not in a dusty shelter built from broken parts. She sat down slowly. "This isn't the future I planned." "Most good ones aren't," Mason replied. She looked at him. "Why are you so calm all the time?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe because I've lost things too." "Like what?" Mason paused. "Family, friends, home. But I didn't want to let those losses decide who I was going to be." Vetra was quiet. Then she said, "When I was in the academy, they taught us never to trust humans." Mason raised an eyebrow. "And now? Still don't?" she said, then added, "But I'm trying." He chuckled. "That's fair." For the first time, the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was calm. Peaceful. A new kind of understanding was forming. Slowly, like a machine built one piece at a time. Vetra stared at the stars through the small window in the shelter's roof. "I'm not ready to forgive what happened," she said. "You don't have to," Mason replied. "But maybe you can learn to live beyond it." She didn't answer right away, but she didn't argue either. The sky above Kiros 9 turned dark as heavy clouds rolled in. Mason stepped outside the shelter, looking up at the swirling dust. The wind had picked up fast. It wasn't just another passing breeze. This was a full sandstorm. One of the worst he had seen in years. He hurried back inside and sealed the door, locking the shelter panels. The wind howled outside like a wild animal, shaking the walls with every blast. The temperature dropped. Visibility outside dropped to nothing. Vetra stood near the window, watching the dust fill the air. She could feel the rumble in her chest. The storm reminded her of something, an old memory she didn't want to think about. "How long will it last?" she asked without turning. "Could be a day." "Maybe more," Mason replied, checking the power reserves. "Good thing we've got food and water." Vetra nodded but stayed quiet. She hated being trapped. The walls felt too close, her thoughts too loud. She sat on the edge of her cot and stared at her leg, the one Mason built. It moved well now. She had even helped repair it last night when a joint had locked. Still, it wasn't her leg. It wasn't the one she was born with. Mason sat across from her, adjusting a damaged drone. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't peaceful either. Something was sitting between them, unspoken and heavy. Vetra finally broke the silence. "I used to fly above clouds like these," she said. "I used to feel free." Mason looked up. "You were a scout, right?" She nodded. "Yes, one of the fastest. I never lost a race during training, never failed a mission. I thought I was special." "You are," Mason said. She shook her head. "Not anymore. My commanders left me behind like a broken tool, not even worth recovering." "That says more about them than you," Mason replied. Vetra looked at him sharply. "You don't know how it feels to be left behind." Mason was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Actually, I do." Vetra blinked. She hadn't expected that. "My brother went to war. He told me he'd be back. He didn't come home. Everyone moved on. The government didn't even send his remains. Just a message and a badge. I'm..." "Sorry?" she said, her voice softer. "I waited for him. For months. I kept thinking he'd walk through the door. But he didn't. And when I tried to talk about it, people said I should stop hoping, that I should just move on." He placed the drone down and looked at her. "That's when I decided to come here. Far from everything. Away from people who forgot." Vetra lowered her eyes. "So, you know the feeling." "Yeah," Mason said. "I know what it's like to feel forgotten." They sat in silence again, but now it felt different. Vetra looked at the leg again. "Sometimes I dream that I still have both legs, that I can run again. Then I wake up and feel nothing below the knee." "That's grief," Mason said gently. "You lost a part of yourself. It takes time to accept that. I don't know if I ever will. You don't have to accept it all at once, just a little at a time." Vetra leaned back and stared at the metal ceiling. The wind outside roared louder, like it was trying to tear through the shelter. "Do you miss Earth?" she asked. "I miss people more than places," Mason answered. "But I guess I've gotten used to this life. Quiet, predictable, until you crashed into it." She gave a small laugh, the first real one since her injury. "Sorry for the trouble," she said. "Trouble has a name now?" Mason teased. She smirked. "It's Vetra." "Well, Vetra, you brought some noise back into my quiet life. Maybe that's not a bad thing." For the rest of the night they talked more, about little things, food, stars, music. Vetra told stories from her academy days. Mason shared how he once tried to build a flying chair and crashed it into a lake. When she finally slept, the storm still raged outside, but inside the shelter something else had calmed. Not the storm in the sky, the one inside her. The sandstorm ended after 2 long days. The sky turned clear again, revealing the twin moons of Kiros 9 shining above the hills. Outside, red dust covered everything. It looked like the world had been painted in rust. Inside the shelter, something had changed too. Vetra no longer stayed quiet. She moved around slowly, using the prosthetic leg more often, and even helped Mason with small tasks. She still walked with effort, but there was strength behind every step now. One morning she stood beside Mason at the workbench, looking at the mess of tools, wires, and parts. She held up a broken drone arm. "This joint is too stiff," she said. It needs more flexibility. Mason nodded. You've got a good eye. She smirked. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of falling. He laughed. Falling's not the problem. Staying down is. Together they began building a new leg, version 3. Vetra called it the better one. This time she didn't just watch or give advice. She worked with her hands, learned how to shape metal, connect circuits, and test energy flow. Mason watched her with quiet pride. The once silent alien scout now filled the room with questions, ideas, and even the occasional sarcastic joke. Her energy was returning, not just to her body but to her spirit. As they worked, Mason noticed something else. She wasn't just building a leg, she was rebuilding herself. That afternoon, Vetra tested the new prosthetic in the open area, behind the shelter. The sun was warm and the wind had calmed. Her steps were smoother. The leg adjusted with each movement, matching her rhythm. It bent naturally, responded faster, and felt more like a part of her than just a tool. She walked from one side of the yard to the other. Then she walked again, and again. Mason clapped slowly. You're officially faster than me now. Vetra smiled. I always was. She looked up at the sky. The same sky she had once ruled in her scout ship. The same sky that had watched her fall. But now, standing on the ground with a metal leg and dust on her face, she felt something she hadn't felt since before the crash. Freedom. Not the kind that comes from flying, the kind that comes from choosing your own path. That evening, Mason and Vetra sat by a small heater eating rehydrated food. Vetra wiped her hands and looked at Mason. Why don't you leave this place? You're smart. You could fix ships, work in a big city. Mason shrugged. I used to think about that, but out here I can do something real, help people, find peace. You helped me, she said softly. He met her eyes. You helped yourself. I just gave you a place to start. There was a long pause. Then Vetra said, I want to keep building, not just legs, for others too, for anyone who needs it. Maybe I'm not a scout anymore, but I can still be useful. Mason smiled. That's a good plan. She nodded. But I'll need tools, better materials, and maybe a bigger shelter. You're thinking like an engineer now, Mason said proudly. She chuckled. Maybe that's what I am now. The thought warmed her in a way she hadn't expected. She had been so focused on what she lost that she never imagined she could become something new. Something better. Over the next few days, they expanded the shelter. Vetra helped design new workbenches. They set up solar-powered lights, organized tools, and created space for others, just in case someone else ever needed help like she did. Each piece of metal they shaped was more than just a project. It was a promise, a future, a second chance. One night, as they sat outside watching the stars, Vetra turned to Mason. You saved me, she said. Not just my body. You reminded me that I'm more than my past. Mason shook his head. You saved yourself, Vetra. I just believed in you. For a moment they said nothing. The wind was gentle. The stars above seemed brighter than ever. Vetra looked down at her metal leg. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and it carried her forward. The days on Kiros 9 grew warmer. The shelter now looked more like a small outpost than a lonely cabin. With solar panels fully working, lights glowing gently at night, and tools neatly lined up, it was clear that something new was growing here, and Vetra had changed. She woke early, fixed problems before Mason even noticed them, and sometimes worked alone for hours. She built a new version of her leg, a sleeker one with better sensors. Each step she took now felt like part of a future she had chosen. But one morning everything changed. The alert system beeped. Mason was repairing a cracked energy cell when the sound made him look up. Vetra stood near the door, staring at the screen. A ship was approaching, not human Kelleran. Vetra's face tightened. It's a scout ship, one of ours. Mason stood beside her. They coming to rescue someone? Vetra shook her head slowly. No. That distress signal. It must have still been active from my crash. They're responding now. Within minutes, the small silver vessel landed a short distance away. Dust swirled around its feet as the ramp lowered. A tall Kalaran officer stepped out, his uniform polished and face stern. 2 guards followed him. He looked at Vetra, then at her leg. His eyes narrowed. "Vetra Kalor," he said. "We didn't expect you to survive." She stepped forward. "Neither did I." He glanced at Mason briefly, then ignored him. "You are to return with us. You will be taken to command for medical evaluation and reassignment." Vetra didn't answer. Her expression didn't change. The officer continued. "You were marked as lost. Your memory core was recovered from the wreckage. Your return is surprising." Vetra crossed her arms. "Surprising? You left me. I was injured and alone. You were considered beyond recovery. We had limited resources. A decision was made." "A decision," she repeated bitterly. The officer frowned. "You are still Kalaran. We will repair what we can and assign you to data work." "Data work?" Vetra asked. "You are no longer suited for field duty," he said. "You'll be placed where your condition is manageable." Vetra took a breath. "I'm not broken. You are not combat ready." "I'm not a soldier anymore," she replied. "I'm a builder now." The officer looked confused. "A builder?" She pointed at the shelter. "We've been fixing tech, helping ourselves, preparing to help others too. People like me. People who were left behind." He looked at the leg again, then at Mason. "This human built that for you?" "No," she said. "He built the first one. I built this one." The officer hesitated. "Still, your place is with your people." Vetra looked at Mason, who stood silently behind her, letting her decide. Then she looked back at the officer. "I'm not going," she said firmly. The officer blinked. "What?" "You left me behind. This human didn't. He gave me hope when I had nothing. He treated me like more than just a role or a number." "This is against orders," the officer said sharply. "Then change your orders," Vetra replied. "Because I've changed." The officer didn't argue further. He simply stared at her, his jaw tight. Then he turned without another word and walked back to the ship. The guards followed. As the ship rose into the sky and disappeared into the clouds, Vetra felt a strange peace. Mason walked up beside her. That was a big decision. "It wasn't easy," she admitted, "but it felt right." He smiled. "You're not the same person who crash-landed here." "No," she agreed. "I'm better." That night, the stars were clear again. Vetra stood outside looking up. Her new leg hummed softly, working perfectly. But it wasn't the machine that made her feel strong. It was the choice. She had chosen to stay. She had chosen to build. She had chosen to believe in herself again. And for the first time in a long while, she was proud. The sun rose slowly over the red hills of Kiros 9, casting long shadows on the rocky ground. Inside the shelter, the soft hum of machines mixed with the quiet footsteps of Vetra moving steadily across the floor. Her prosthetic leg felt lighter than ever, a symbol of how far she had come. Mason was at the workbench repairing a small drone. He glanced up and smiled when he saw her. "Morning, Vetra. Ready for today?" She nodded. More than ready. For the first time since her crash, she felt like herself. Not just a wounded scout or a broken machine, but a whole person with purpose. The past still haunted her, but it no longer controlled her. Outside the shelter, the quiet of the desert was broken by a soft sound. It was the whir of small engines and the gentle steps of robotic helpers Mason had built over time. They moved smoothly across the rocky land, carrying parts and tools to a nearby work area. Vetra and Mason had been working on a new project, prosthetics and tools designed for others like her. Aliens and humans who had been hurt in the endless conflicts of space left behind or forgotten. "We need to be ready," Mason said. "If word gets out, more will come." Vetra smiled. They will. And they will find hope here. She turned to look at the horizon, where the stars still lingered, faintly even as dawn broke. The universe was vast and dangerous, but also full of chance. Chance to rebuild. Chance to heal. Chance to stand again. Later that day, Vetra received a message from a distant Kalaran settlement. A request for help had come. An injured soldier, left behind on a remote planet. The sender didn't know about her choice, her new life, or her partnership with Mason. She paused before replying. The old Vetra might have returned immediately, obeying orders without question. But this Vetra had a different path. She wrote back, "I am no longer the soldier you knew, but I am a builder. If you need help, I will come, not as a warrior, but as a healer." She sent the message and looked at Mason. "What now?" "We build," he said simply. "And we wait." Days passed. The shelter became a beacon, a place where the broken were fixed, and the lost found new strength. Vetra taught Mason how to design limbs that adapted to different bodies and environments. Mason taught her how to survive in a world far from home. Together they combined alien technology and human ingenuity. They laughed, they worked, they dreamed, and slowly, a new family grew. A family not of blood or rank, but of trust and choice. 1. Evening, as the twin moons rose high, Vetra stood outside. Her new leg moved effortlessly as she walked across the sand. She stopped and looked at the stars. Memories of the crash, the pain, and the dark days came to her mind. But they were no longer chains. They were lessons. A soft voice came behind her. "Vetra." She turned to see Mason standing there holding a small device. "I found something," he said. "A signal from a group who needs us." Her eyes lit up with determination. "Then we don't wait," she said. "We go." As they prepared to leave the shelter for the first time in months, Vetra took one last look at the place that had saved her life. "This was where I lost myself," she said quietly. "And this," Mason said, "is where you found yourself." Vetra smiled. "Thank you, Mason, for standing with me when no one else did." He shrugged. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," she said firmly. "You did more. You gave me a reason to stand again." Together, they stepped into the ship Mason had repaired long ago. The engines hummed to life. As the ship lifted off, leaving the red dust behind, Vetra felt a new purpose filling her heart. Not a mission forced on her, not a duty from others, but a choice she made, a future she would build, and a reason to stand always.